Hey there, Laker fans. Welcome to another episode of Radio KBE. I just wanted to say thanks to everybody. We broke the 200 subscriber barrier, or milestone on YouTube. So it ended up being pretty awesome. Again, I just can't tell you guys how much I appreciate the support, the comments, the likes, the shares, whether it's on YouTube or whether it's on Twitter. It's been pretty awesome. And it looks like you guys like the more bite-sized episodes, so I'll try and keep that. I'll try and keep that sort of cadence going. Again, I'm trying to find a consistent routine, so maybe doing shorter episodes is the best way to do it, and then saving like the deep dives for something on the weekend for people to digest or something like that. It's a good idea. But regardless, I appreciate everybody that's been supporting so far. It's been pretty awesome. So if you haven't, if you can like, subscribe, it helps the channel out a lot, and I appreciate you. So today's episode, I actually wanted to talk about just kind of what I'm looking at the wrong way, but the title sort of says, and this thing with media targeting Lakers Twitter, like it's genuinely been a really annoying thing over the past, like I would say 3 weeks that it's been going on. If you followed the Lakers at all, and you followed just kind of the ups and downs of the season, you know that it's not just been one issue that's sort of plagued this team, and we don't have to rehash all that sort of stuff. It's been a very multi-layered issue from the players to the coaches and the front office as it relates to roster construction. But what's been happening since the Lakers offseason has been like this continual hamster wheel of hell when it comes to just every single rumor with this team. And it has been, normally I don't give it much thought. And if you watch the episode that I did in regards to the value of Russell Westbrook's contract and it being expiring, it should be no surprise that some of the stuff that you're hearing from the front office is actually what's happening. And the way it's being presented to like the Twitter audience or to the mainstream audience, national audience, has been like this some sort of like, I'm trying to figure out the right word to describe what it is, but it's almost an attempt to induce panic within the fan base, right? And so and it's happened over the past 3 weeks. It actually started with the whole hiring process. So the Lakers hadn't even started their coaching search, and they were just kind of spitballing names. They were asking for permission from a bunch of different people, and Doc Rivers' name just floated up. And when Doc Rivers' name floated up, and Mark Jackson was also named too as well, I understood why they were being called on. Like I understood why those names were being mentioned, established coaches and stuff like that. But the origin of those coaching names really didn't make much sense, and that was something that I was very confused about. Like Doc Rivers was actively coaching Philly, and the Lakers were talking about him as if he was going to be hired and Philly was going to fire him. So we fast forward. Mike Brown ends up getting hired by Sacramento, and this story comes out that the Lakers are still waiting on to see what happens with Doc Rivers. And once the Sixers get bounced, it's made pretty clear by Philadelphia that Doc Rivers isn't going anywhere. But the story about the Lakers waiting on Doc Rivers came after that. And so it was strange because what ended up what's been happening with this team is we'll get news from the actual front office about stuff that's actually happening, and then somebody will slip in like a writer. And I don't want to blame the writer because the writers are being told this. I don't think writers just make stuff up. And, like Mark Stein is a good example. We'll get into one of his things in a second. Like, I don't think writers make this stuff up. I think they do get told some of this stuff. And this is the more reputable writers is who I'm talking about. But the larger concern is what's happening with the aggregators. And when I talk about aggregators, it's the ones that are run by, specific individuals, whether it be NBA Central, Legion Hoops Central, whatever names that they have. And it's also expanding now a little bit into like Bleacher Report and stuff like that. What's happening is they're taking stories and then they're aggregating them to they're aggregating them to the public through Twitter or whatever, but there's like almost like the tone of it is completely changed to induce panic. And if you know it, I work in marketing. If you know anything about marketing, when it comes to like these big brands, Bleacher Report, NBA Central, and stuff like that, like it doesn't matter if it's negative engagement or positive engagement, as long as it's not like blatant misinformation or it's not something that goes into like the isms, racism, sexism, that sort of stuff. As long as it doesn't touch any of those things, any engagement is great. And what I've noticed that's been happening this offseason, it's not new. It's always happened with, like, if you've been a Lakers fan for a long time, people sensationalizing Laker news has always, the purpose of it has always been because we're in LA, it's a big market, a lot of fans out here, there's a big presence online. So there's always going to be reactions and stuff like that. And this was something that happened even during our championship season. There was a lot of folks that, when we lost to like the Raptors or Indiana, you had the radio jockeys on the local radio having long 2-hour conversations about are the Lakers a real contender because they lost to the Pacers in the middle of like on the 5th game of a 5-game road trip. Like, are they really contenders? Even though we were like the number 1 seed the entire time. So that stuff, it's just, you got to have conversations, stuff like that. But one thing that I've noticed that's like sort of started happening, and this is not Russ specific, it's just, I would say it's probably just since LeBron's been here. And it has nothing to do with LeBron. It's just, it's so easy to monetize who he is. It's so easy to, and you get the Lakers brand and LeBron, you can monetize it. It's like a lightning rod. And it's so much low effort stuff that's been going on that it's like, it feels like aggregators and writers are really trying to go out of their way to put like the most limited amount of substance in some of the stuff that they talk about, and try and maximize the engagement and maximize the reaction that they get from Lakers Twitter. So it's not positive sometimes. A lot of times it's the goal is to target for outrage. The goal is to target for negativity. And the reason why I wanted to do this episode is because it's happening more and more. And it's I don't know, and this is just my opinion, like it's getting to a point where it's like it's making me not want to follow writers. Like the misaggregation of stuff and sometimes it borders misinformation. Again, it's not the writers, it's the aggregators that are causing the issue because they're putting a spin on it that makes it seem like it's a bad thing, or it's like, a bomb is about to explode in a couple of days or something like that, and they're trying to make it sound like it's like something that Laker fans should be panicking and be extremely upset about. Obviously, there's a side to Twitter that sees those kinds of stories and retweets it because they want to induce panic because they don't like the Lakers or they don't like a certain player. And that's fine. That's just the nature of Twitter. And my goal isn't to tell people how they should react to stuff, but it's just, my goal is just to kind of try to make people aware of what's happening. And so, the most recent example I can give is the Lakers hiring thing. Like, they had finalized officially, right? Adrian Wojnarowski and Shams Charania, they both put out tweets giving us the final candidates for the next Lakers head coaching position, which was Terry Stotts, Darvin Ham, and Kenny Atkinson. And, we didn't know we knew that they were going to interview him. This is jumping around time, but we knew that they were going to interview him at some point. But we didn't know exactly when it was going to be and stuff like that. And the very week following, the immediate next week after that, even though we've been told through official channels that they were, those were the head coaches that the Lakers were looking at, a story breaks or a rumor breaks that the Lakers are still interested in Doc Rivers. And this was even after the Sixers had already said that Doc Rivers wasn't going anywhere. And we just ran with it. Like, fans just ran with it. That the front office, like, this is, like, the front office clearly, they're trying to make the worst. And I understand the front office hasn't earned any grace from the fans and stuff like that. But it's just, it can't be that easy. Like, we can't just completely throw away critical thinking and do something like that. And I'm not saying give the front office a chance, but it's like, at this point, like if you're reacting to stuff like that, when you're being told through official channels exactly what's happening, and then just some writer puts it, again, not the writer's fault, he's being told this, right? It's probably Doc Rivers' camp. The day that Doc Rivers story came out, Kevin Garnett tweeted something about in support of Doc Rivers, or not tweeted, or he put something on Instagram in support of Doc Rivers. JJ Redick, surprisingly, goes on national television and turns around and says the Laker job's not a good job. So now he's downplaying the opportunity as if he's talking to one of our final head coach candidates and trying to convince him not to take that job. So it's very clear that sometimes these sort of things have the original source that's pushing this information is there. They're trying to do that. And then a week later after that, we get a story. So, at that point, everybody's just like, we got the head coaching candidates, but our front office, the sentiment is our front office is a bunch of idiots because they're shilling on Doc Rivers, even though they told us who the final candidates are. And then all of a sudden, 1 week after that, another rumor story breaks that Doc Rivers is LeBron's preferred choice. Now, mind you, like 3 or 4 weeks ago, Mark Jackson was LeBron's preferred choice. So it's like, and Twitter ran with that. Twitter ran with like LeBron's the one who wants Doc Rivers. So now it's like Clutch versus Lakers thing all over again. And like that's like this, and then eventually Darvin Ham gets hired. They make the right hire. We hear the story that Darvin Ham's going to be allowed to pick his own assistants, which is a huge deal. And then the other thing is that he doesn't have to check in with Kurt Rambis like Vogel did for the 3 years that he was here, which is also, in my opinion, a big deal because I'm not a fan of Kurt Rambis. Great basketball role player. I don't think he's a good coach. I don't think he's a good executive. I think he is a proxy for a guy like Phil Jackson in our front office. I know Phil Jackson's involved, but I think he's always been a proxy for Phil Jackson because Phil Jackson physically couldn't keep up with doing the job of a front office executive, and they have aligned thinking, and I don't think it's modern, and I don't think it's successful for a Lakers brand. But like the Lakers continued on their normal path, even though like this Doc Rivers stuff was being interjected, and was it the front office that preferred him, or was it is it LeBron James that preferred him? And so that's all water under the bridge now. But like now you're seeing this with the Russ stuff, and that's what's really. Now this is it's like another thing. Like again, just a few videos ago, like I think it was on May 25th. I said, look, it's May 25th. We're not trading Russ right now. Like the season's not even officially over. We're not even in that time period between when the season officially is over. Like somebody's won the finals, and like the season doesn't actually turn over until after the draft. So if the finals end quickly in 5 or 6 games, it's entirely possible that the Lakers will have 2-3 weeks before. The season turns over and like the draft happens and all that sort of stuff. The draft happens and all that sort of stuff. So, like, all the news that you're getting right now is just, it's just common sense posturing. Like, if the Lakers are going around through official channels and telling Mark Stein and telling other folks, like, hey, we're not trading a first-round pick to get rid of Russ. That's the right thing to do. Like, trading Russ is... giving up first rounders just to get rid of Russ is silly. It doesn't make sense to do that unless you're getting back like a first round pick talent in addition to a bunch of depth and stuff like that, or you're getting another first rounder back, like you're swapping first rounders or something like that. And that's something we can cover in a later episode once the season's over. But this stuff about Russ is being like. It's not even news, but it's being presented in a way to induce panic in the fan base. And I think that's, I don't know about you guys, but it's become like a genuinely annoying thing. Like it's unnecessary. And I don't blame the writers. It's just the way it's being aggregated. So I'll give you an example of the one that the one that we saw today. It's this one right here. Like Bleacher Report is aggregating something that's been said in Mark Stein's newsletter saying that the Lakers plan to keep Russell Westbrook. They don't the Lakers can't plan on doing anything else right now. Like they're not going to go out and say we're going to trade Russ 100% because that's a leverage position that you lose. LA refuses to give up additional assets to send him out. yeah, that's the right thing to do. Like, we don't want to give up additional assets because historically there's been a bunch of trades that just happened in this past year. Kristaps Porzingis got traded. He has a $36 million option. Russ has a $47 million option. Kristaps Porzingis just got traded to the Washington Wizards, and he's going to take his $36 million option for Spencer Dinwiddie and Davis Bertans. Like, I'm not saying that was a great deal for Dallas, but they didn't give up any picks to do that. And I think it's kind of crazy for people to just assume that, because the Lakers refuse to give up additional assets, or because that's their stance right now, that they won't, or that they're content with just like standing pat and running everything back. Is it possible that could happen? For sure. But does it make sense for something like that to happen? Not really. Like, it's very clear that they need a certain type of depth. And now with Darvin Ham in tow, like, they're going to have to change their roster philosophy and their roster build to fit the philosophy that he wants. And it's stuff like, so, sorry, I took it down, but, to continue reading, like, it's May 30th. It's Memorial Day when I'm recording this. This is the position that you have to take. But and Westbrook is expected to exercise his $47 million player option. Like, yeah, we need him to do that to trade him if we're going to trade him. So this like idea, like the way this gets presented by Bleacher Report is, and this is not to demonize Bleacher Report, but the way that this gets presented by Bleacher Report is like, oh my gosh. Like, if you read this, and I'm sure if you like start reading through the tweets and stuff like that, you'll see people show up in this, like, you'll see Laker fans be like, hey, look, yeah, it doesn't make sense. Then you'll see people in here say, hey, trade Russ for John Wall. And you'll see, player stand accounts be panicked and stuff like that. And again, this is not to say that you're not allowed to feel that way, but it's just, you're not getting new news. You're just getting the same news over and over again. And the part that's annoying is the fan base just continues to keep falling for it. We can't do anything right now. We have to wait for him to opt in. And once he opts in, then we can actually trade him. So we can't take any positions about like being desperate. And so if anything, Mark Stein going out and reporting something like that is actually to the Lakers' benefit. Like, it's to the Lakers' benefit that Mark Stein is going out there and saying, yeah, they're not going to give up additional picks just to get rid of him. Because then the guys that are wasting, like the teams that are trying to fleece the Lakers, they know not to waste their time. And I'm sure there's people in the fan base that have different opinions on Russ, whether he's valuable, whether he's not valuable and stuff like that. But there are pluses to what Russ is. That and the largest issue with Russ was his fit with the team. It's not who he is as a player, as a person. A few videos ago, I mentioned the very same thing that has been a surprise, that I'm surprised nobody's talked about it. He's been in the league for 14, 15 years. This is the first time in his career that I can remember people talking badly or the front office or bad things about him and the locker room. It's not so. I've never heard that anywhere. Nobody in Houston said it. Nobody on the Wizards has ever said it. And obviously nobody in OKC has ever said it. No one has ever said he's been a locker room issue. And that's why it always gave me pause during the regular season and as the season was ending, that people were saying that about Russ. And this is not to defend him. It's just, I've never heard that. So how did it happen that he went this much into his career with three other teams, was always talked about as a positive locker room guy? He was combative with media for sure. But all of a sudden he doesn't get along with people in the locker room. And I think that our front office did a large disservice to the players on this team, not just Russ, but also LeBron to Anthony Davis, with the way that they conducted themselves. And they basically allowed, and that's really who I blame. Our front office took so much stuff that, and I believe it was our front office that did it. So I'm not saying that this is my speculation, that there are people in our front office who last season went out of their way to try and villainize the players on our team. Not Russ, Like they did it with LeBron too when it came to the trade deadline and who wanted Russ, who didn't want Russ, that sort of thing. And then they took it a step further and talked about Anthony Davis's, how he takes care of himself. It's different when a fan does it. Like when I'm talking about Anthony Davis having a lack of motor, that's me doing it as a fan. But when the front office does it, that can be something that's, like as a fan, I'm like, you can't do that to a player. And, Magic Johnson going on First Take or going on ESPN and saying, yeah, if he doesn't get healthy, we're going to have to trade him. Like, those are, like, who says that? Like, who goes on national television who's aligned with your front office goes and says something like that? And I think that perception or, like, that approach ended up, it's basically allowed NBA aggregators and NBA writers to just make anything up and we'll believe it. And I'm not saying you shouldn't believe it, but I think that the casual audience is just willing to believe anything bad about this team now. And I think the Lakers went through, at least recently, a good process with picking the right head coach options as their finalists and then landing on Darvin Ham. So I think they've made some positive steps moving forward. Whether they keep Russ, they move Russ, that'll be a big question in itself. But who the assistant coaches are, what the rest of the roster looks like, there's still a lot of stuff that has to go. And we're barely finishing up May. So there's still a lot of time left. So, I would just caution. The goal of this video was just to kind of talk about this out loud. Like, I would just caution fans of the team. Just be careful with what the media is doing. Because folks in the media, they're almost faceless, right? Like the social media manager that's working for Bleacher Report or whatever, XYZ media company that has a blue check mark on Twitter, like they're faceless. There's nobody there to hold them accountable, right? So they can misinform, they can misaggregate, it doesn't matter. And like I said, as long as it doesn't violate one of the isms, racism, sexism, one of those things, like they'll continue to do stuff like that. And targeting Lakers Twitter and targeting and trying to phrase things to get a reaction out of Lakers Twitter is now like a core strategy. Like the Russ lowlight stuff that was being shared, like there's branded accounts like BetMGM and DirecTV were posting Westbrook's lowlights on Twitter. So you should give you an idea of like how this homogenized ecosystem, like everybody's picking from the same piece of content and putting their own spin on it so then they can get the engagement that they want. And that's going to continue to happen. Even when Russ is gone, they're going to do it with LeBron. They're going to do it with Anthony Davis. It doesn't matter because the reaction from Lakers Twitter is what they want. They want that sort of action and stuff like that. And I mean, look no further than just kind of some of the stuff you've seen during the finals coverage. Think about your favorite analyst. Like your favorite analyst who's, supposed to be a Lakers fan or be a Lakers analyst or whatever it is. Like they've probably transitioned to talking about the finals, right? ESPN First Take, they're all talking about the finals because they're all fans of the NBA or analysts of the NBA. But they're always interjecting something to do with the Lakers, aren't they? Like it's always, here's my analysis on this game, or here's my analysis on this team between Miami and the Celtics or the Warriors and Dallas, and now what the finals previews are. But they always have to carve out a segment for the Lakers, don't they? That's just the nature of just kind of what it is. But some people are taking it one step further. They're aggregating stuff that wants to panic. This is something that happened last season too as well when the Lakers traded for Russ. When they traded for him, there were people who didn't like the trade, which is fine. I don't really have any issue with that. If you don't like the trade, you don't like the person, you don't like the fit, that's totally fine. There was actually a lot of smart folks who didn't like the fit, that made really good points, and I agreed with them. I was like, yeah, I don't know how this is going to fit, but I'm just keeping my fingers crossed that they fit because LeBron probably wanted somebody to help him out playmaking and stuff like that. But there are people who were projecting, but even those people who didn't see the fit, there was like a little bit of optimism with them. These are fans and some of the writers. Until it looked like it definitely wasn't going to work, they kept a shred of optimism. But there are people who went out of their way from the beginning to project doom on this team, project doom on the team. And the crazy part is the most common stance was, when the Lakers get in the playoffs, you're going to watch Russ implode. And then the Lakers didn't make the playoffs. But then the reason why the Lakers didn't make the playoffs isn't because Russ imploded. It's because our two stars weren't healthy. So they were so focused on picking one person and projecting doom for the entire team based on one person that they completely ignored all the other flaws that were going on with the team. The fact that we didn't have any wings, that we had 6'3" and under guards, and we were asking the guards 6'7", 6'9" players. The fact that DeAndre Jordan got signed and was starting. The fact that we had a coach who was openly telling reporters that he was ignoring the analytics that was letting people know that the player was not a good fit with that lineup, and continued to run them even though he saw bad results with them. So it's like we were so hyper-focused on one thing that we completely ignored everything else. And those things all have to be fixed. I'm not saying that the one thing wasn't a problem. That was a problem that needs to be fixed. But we completely ignored everything else. And it wasn't until it was very clear that the Lakers weren't going to go very far did everybody zoom out and start becoming objective again and stop blaming one person. And I think that's something that writers and NBA media have really kind of noticed. They've noticed that if you can find one thing or one person to target, Lakers Twitter will pounce on them. Everything it's almost like they're trying to condition us into always being outraged or to always being panicked. And so, like we saw with the Darvin Ham thing, like we're seeing with this Russell Westbrook thing, the trade thing, it's only May. We can't do anything right now. We can't do anything until he opts in. And all we can do is hope that Rob is planning, Rob in the front office, they're getting all their scenarios ready. They're thinking about what role players they need, that they're in constant communion with Darvin Ham to figure out what kind of players we need on the roster. Those are things that they can do right now. And I'm sure some of them are taking vacations and stuff like that because it's off season. But those are the things that we can do right now until he actually opts in, until we have some finality in regards to what's going on with the rest of the, player options and stuff like that. Even Kendrick Nunn hasn't, he said it verbally, but Kendrick Nunn hasn't actually opted in, right? We still have to wait for him to opt in. And so these sort of things have to get settled before we do anything. So, the goal of this episode was just to kind of highlight what's been going on this offseason. And it's going to continue happening. Media and aggregators are going to try and get the most negative reaction out of Lakers Twitter. And it's just a content strategy now. And so I encourage Laker fans to not fall for it. But look, even I respond to stuff sometimes, but it's just to keep a level head. We can't do anything right now. It's still May. It's May 30th at the time of this recording. So it's going to take us a little bit longer before we get there, but just be aware of it. Be aware of stuff that makes absolutely no sense. Why would this randomly get inserted into it? And who actually gains by sharing this sort of information? Because the Lakers front office is in a position where there's a huge microscope on them from the interview from Jeannie Buss. They have to get it right. And they have to turn the ship around, or else maybe they will get canned, or maybe they will get demoted or moved into lesser positions of power. So hopefully this has been a little helpful and helped reduce some of the panic that may be going around with some of the stuff that's being shared. Mark Stein has now become a fixture with Laker news, so that's been sort of interesting. But regardless, I appreciate everybody who's been liking. If you haven't subscribed, I appreciate it. If you subscribe, it helps the channel. But you guys have really been amazing. This has been a lot of fun. I enjoy having these conversations in this manner because it's just better than tweeting. It's better than writing. And if you've signed up for the newsletter, I'm trying to figure out how to make it a companion experience. Probably, I think the best way we'll probably do it is I'll give you guys trade ideas when the time is right. I'll give you guys the trade ideas that I think would help this roster. And then I'll give it to you in written form in the newsletter. so that like you guys get it first. Because I don't know who actually watches the YouTube videos, but I know Twitter is very lazy when it comes to watching YouTube videos. So because I know the folks that are subscribed on YouTube are, they're into the Lakers the same way I am. If you subscribe to the newsletter, also you can find it on my Twitter. It's in my bio. I'll use that as a guide when we do these videos, so we can talk through it together, and then you'll always have like it as a reference to in your email if you sign up for it. So as always, I appreciate everybody that takes their time to watch these videos. I hope everybody's ends up having a wonderful Memorial Day weekend, and if nothing else, I'll see you guys on the timeline if you follow me on Twitter. Or I'll see you in the next video. So I hope you guys have a wonderful day, evening, and I'll see you in the next one.